The storm clouds gathered like dark promises above the winding coastal highway, and Sophia Blackwood pressed harder on the accelerator of her cherry red Tesla. Her perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the steering wheel as her assistant's voice crackled through the Bluetooth. The Tokyo investors are getting impatient, Sophia. The video conference was supposed to start 10 minutes ago. I know, Sophia replied, her emerald eyes flicking between the road and her phone's GPS. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and her tailored Armani suit hadn't wrinkled despite the 2-hour drive from the city. Tell them I'll be there in 20 minutes. The countryside Wi-Fi better not fail me again. She was rushing to her grandmother's old cottage, the one property she'd inherited that she hadn't sold off yet. The irony wasn't lost on her that she, CEO of Blackwood Luxury Brands, was heading to a place that probably hadn't seen a renovation since the 1950s. But the Tokyo deal required her signature on physical documents, and her grandmother's cottage was the closest quiet place with internet. The rain began as fat droplets on her windshield, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. Sophia leaned forward, squinting through the increasing storm. The coastal road was treacherous on good days, with sharp turns that hugged cliff faces on one side and dropped to rocky shores on the other. That's when she saw them, a family of deer frozen in her headlights. Time slowed. Sophia yanked the wheel hard to the right, tires screaming against wet asphalt. The Tesla spun like a dancer, elegant and deadly, before sliding sideways toward the guardrail. The metal barrier groaned, bent, and snapped like a twig under the car's momentum. No, no, no! Sophia screamed as her car tilted over the edge, the front wheels spinning in empty air above the 40-foot drop to the rocky beach below. Marcus Rivera had been splitting firewood behind his small farmhouse when he heard the crash. The sound of metal against metal, followed by a woman's scream, cut through the storm like a blade. He dropped his axe and ran toward the road, his work boots splashing through puddles. At 29, Marcus had the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from honest work under the sun. His dark hair was perpetually tousled by ocean winds, and his deep brown eyes held the kind of warmth that could calm frightened animals, a skill he'd needed often as the local veterinarian and small-scale farmer. His hands were strong and scarred from years of healing and building, and rain soaked through his flannel shirt as he reached the broken guardrail. The red Tesla hung at a precarious angle, rear wheels still on solid ground, but the front end suspended over the cliff. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he could see a woman inside, alive but clearly in shock. "Hey!" Marcus called out, his voice cutting through the storm. "Don't move! I'm coming to get you!" He grabbed the tow rope from his pickup truck and quickly assessed the situation. The car could slip at any moment. Moving carefully but quickly, he secured one end of the rope to his truck's hitch and the other around the Tesla's rear axle. Then he inched toward the driver's door. The window was cracked but not shattered. The woman inside had striking green eyes wide with terror and auburn hair that had come loose from its perfect style. Even in her panic, she was breathtakingly beautiful. "I'm Marcus," he said through the glass, his voice steady and calm. "I'm going to get you out, but I need you to stay very still, okay?" Sophia nodded, her usual commanding presence replaced by vulnerability. She'd never felt so helpless in her life. Marcus carefully opened the door, the car groaning ominously. "I'm going to unbuckle your seatbelt and lift you out. When I do, don't grab onto anything. Just let me do the work." His hands were surprisingly gentle as he freed her from the seatbelt and slipped one arm under her knees, the other around her back. Sophia found herself pressed against his broad chest, inhaling the scent of rain and something warm and earthy, so different from the expensive cologne she was used to. He carried her to safety just as another section of guardrail gave way, and the Tesla's front end dipped lower. "My car!" Sophia gasped. "Cars can be replaced," Marcus said simply, setting her down on the covered porch of his nearby farmhouse. "You can't." Inside his modest home, Sophia sat wrapped in a thick quilt while Marcus built up the fire in his stone fireplace. The cottage was nothing like her Manhattan penthouse. Rough-hewn wooden beams, handmade furniture, books stacked on every surface, and the kind of lived-in warmth that came from a place truly being someone's home. "Your phone's dead," Marcus said, returning from the kitchen with two steaming mugs. "Storm knocked out the cell towers anyway. This is chamomile tea from my garden." Sophia accepted the mug, her hands still shaking slightly. She was used to giving orders, making decisions that affected thousands of employees, controlling every aspect of her perfectly curated life. But here, in this simple room with this man who'd saved her life, she felt completely out of her element. "I have a conference call with Tokyo," she said weakly, a billion-dollar deal hanging in the balance. Marcus sat in the armchair across from her, his dark eyes studying her face. "How long since you've taken a day off?" The question caught her off guard. I, that's not. I don't have time for days off." "When's the last time you watched a sunset without checking your phone?" Sophia opened her mouth to answer and realized she couldn't remember. "Why does that matter?" "Because you almost died tonight," Marcus said quietly. "And the first thing you're worried about is a business call." The words hung in the air between them. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside the cottage, there was only the crackle of the fire and the gentle ticking of an old clock on the mantel. "What do you do?" Sophia asked, deflecting. "Besides rescue damsels in distress?" Marcus smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his entire face, making him even more handsome. "I'm a veterinarian. I run a small practice in town and keep some animals here. Chickens, a couple of goats, an old horse named Thunder." "You're a vet who lives on a farm and saves people in storms?" Sophia found herself smiling despite everything. "What are you? Some kind of superhero?" "Just a guy who believes in helping when help's needed." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Sophia woke on Marcus's couch, covered by the same quilt, to the sound of roosters crowing and the distant lowing of cattle. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out over rolling green hills that stretched to the ocean. She found Marcus in the kitchen, making pancakes from scratch. He was humming softly to himself, and the sight of him, hair mussed from sleep, moving with easy confidence in his own space, made something flutter in her chest. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Hope you like blueberries. I picked them yesterday." "You pick your own blueberries?" "Among other things." He flipped a pancake with practiced ease. "The tow truck should be here around noon to deal with your car. Might be salvageable, might not." Sophia accepted a plate of pancakes that smelled like heaven. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten anything that wasn't delivered by a high-end catering service or grabbed from some trendy restaurant between meetings. "These are incredible," she admitted after the first bite. "Secret ingredient," Marcus said, sitting across from her with his own plate. "Which is?" "Time. I made the batter the night before. Let it rest. Good things can't be rushed." Something in the way he said it made Sophia look up from her breakfast. Their eyes met across the simple wooden table, and she felt that flutter again, stronger this time. "I should call my office," she said, but made no move toward her phone. "Should you?" "I have responsibilities. People depending on me." "What about you?" Marcus asked. "Who takes care of Sophia Blackwood when she needs taking care of?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She'd built her entire identity around being the person who didn't need taking care of, who handled everything herself, who was always in control. "I take care of myself," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His palm was warm and calloused, and Sophia found herself not wanting to pull away. "Everyone needs someone," he said simply. After breakfast, Marcus showed her around his property. The farm was small but clearly loved. Vegetable gardens with neat rows of plants, a chicken coop where hens clucked contentedly, and a pasture where an old bay horse grazed peacefully. Everything was well-maintained but unpretentious, functional but beautiful in its simplicity. "This is Thunder," Marcus said as the horse ambled over to the fence. The animal nuzzled his shoulder affectionately. "Rescued him from a bad situation 3 years ago. Now he's the king of this little kingdom." Sophia tentatively reached out to pet the horse's neck. Thunder's coat was soft and warm under her palm, and when he whickered softly, she found herself laughing. "When's the last time you touched an animal?" Marcus asked. I I had a cat when I was little, before my parents died. The admission surprised her. She rarely talked about her childhood, about the time before she'd been thrust into the world of board meetings and business suits. What happened to the cat? Grandmother said it wasn't practical. When I inherited the business at 21, there wasn't time for pets, or much of anything else. Marcus studied her profile as she continued to stroke Thunder's neck. In the morning sunlight, her auburn hair caught fire, and without her perfect makeup and tailored clothes, she looked younger, softer, more real. Practical isn't the same as living, he said quietly. Before Sophia could respond, a phone started ringing inside the house. Her phone, finally getting signal. She looked toward the cottage, then back at Marcus. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the urgent need to answer. "It can wait," she said, surprising herself. They spent the morning walking his property, Marcus showing her plants she'd never seen, teaching her to collect eggs from the chickens, which made her laugh when the hens seemed offended by her technique, and explaining how he'd built much of the farm infrastructure himself. "You really do all this alone?" Sophia asked as they sat on his porch, sharing a thermos of coffee. "Mostly. I have some help during busy seasons, but yeah, it's peaceful work. Doesn't it get lonely?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, looking out over his fields. "Sometimes, but lonely's different from alone. I'd rather be alone out here than lonely in a crowd." Sophia knew exactly what he meant, though she'd never admitted it to herself before. She was lonely all the time, in boardrooms full of people, at charity galas surrounded by acquaintances, even in her own penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city of 8 million people. "I'm lonely all the time," she heard herself say, "even when I'm surrounded by people, especially then." Marcus turned to look at her, and the understanding in his eyes was almost too much to bear. "That's because you're surrounded by the wrong people," he said simply. The tow truck arrived just after noon, along with a mechanic who pronounced her Tesla a total loss. The front end was crushed, the electronics fried by seawater, and the frame bent beyond repair. "Insurance should cover it," the mechanic said cheerfully, "though you might be without a car for a few days while the paperwork goes through." Sophia's first instinct was panic. She had meetings, appointments, a life that required constant motion. But looking at Marcus's calm expression, she felt something else entirely. "I could drive you back to the city," Marcus offered, "or you could stay another day. Storm's supposed to clear completely by tonight. Might be nice to see some stars." "I haven't seen stars in years," Sophia admitted. "Light pollution in Manhattan." "Then you should stay." It wasn't a question, but it wasn't a demand either. It was simply an offer given freely with no expectation attached. Sophia couldn't remember the last time someone had offered her something without wanting something in return. "Okay," she said, the word coming out like a breath she'd been holding for years. "One more night." That evening, after a dinner of fresh vegetables from Marcus's garden and fish he'd caught that morning, they walked down to the beach where her car had nearly ended up. The Tesla had been towed away, leaving only some disturbed sand and the memory of how close she'd come to losing everything. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been there?" Sophia asked as they walked along the water's edge. "No point in thinking about things that didn't happen," Marcus replied. "You're here now. That's what matters." "But what if—" "Sophia." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of coral and gold, and his dark eyes were serious. "You could spend your whole life thinking about what-ifs, or you could spend it living. Is that what you do? Just live?" "I try to, every day." They continued walking as the sky darkened and the first stars began to appear. True to Marcus's word, they were brilliant out here. Thousands of points of light scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet. "It's beautiful," Sophia breathed, tilting her head back to take it all in. "Yeah," Marcus said, but when she looked over, he was watching her instead of the sky. "It is." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Sophia felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by something she couldn't name but didn't want to resist. Marcus reached up and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Sophia." "Yes? I know you have a whole other life waiting for you, Important things, successful things. But I need you to know, these last 2 days, having you here, it's been the best 2 days I've had in a long time. Sophia's heart hammered in her chest. She thought about her penthouse apartment, her corner office, her calendar packed with meetings and obligations. Then she thought about collecting eggs with laughing chickens, about pancakes made from scratch, about the way Marcus looked at her like she was more than just her achievements. Marcus, she said softly, what if I told you I didn't want to go back? I'd ask you what you wanted instead. I want, Sophia took a shaky breath. I want to learn how to make pancakes from scratch. I want to help you feed the chickens and learn their names. I want to see more sunsets and count more stars. I want to remember what it feels like to just be. And your business? Your whole life in the city? Sophia thought about it seriously. I have good people working for me. The company would survive without me micromanaging every detail. Maybe even thrive. She looked up at him, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. I've spent so many years building a life that looks successful from the outside, but I've been dying inside. Yesterday, when my car went over that cliff, I wasn't scared of dying. I was scared that I'd never really lived. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. Then stay. Learn to live. Just like that. Just like that. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sure, like everything else about him. Sophia felt something inside her chest crack open, not breaking, but blooming, like a flower that had been waiting its whole life for the right light to grow toward. 6 months later, Sophia stood in the kitchen of what had once been Marcus's cottage alone, but was now theirs together. She was making pancakes from scratch, the batter resting overnight just like he taught her. Through the window, she could see Marcus in the garden, harvesting vegetables for the farmer's market they'd be setting up at later that morning. Her phone sat silent on the counter. She still ran Blackwood luxury brands, but remotely now, with a brilliant COO handling day-to-day operations in the city. The company was doing better than ever, and Sophia had never been happier with her work, or her life. Morning, beautiful, Marcus said, coming through the back door with a basket of tomatoes and herbs. He kissed her cheek as he passed, and Sophia leaned into the familiar warmth of his presence. Morning, farmer boy, she replied, flipping a perfect golden pancake. Ready for another day at the market? With you? Always. As they sat down to breakfast together, Sophia looked out at the view that had once seemed so foreign and now felt like home. The ocean sparkled in the morning sun. Thunder grazed peacefully in his pasture, and somewhere in the distance the chickens were arguing about something important in the way chickens do. She'd learned to live, and in doing so, she'd learned to love. Not just Marcus, but the life they'd built together. A life that was simple and complicated, quiet and full, practical and magical all at once. No regrets? Marcus asked, as if reading her thoughts. Sophia reached across the table and took his hand, his wedding ring warm against her palm. Only one. What's that? I wish I'd driven off that cliff sooner. Marcus laughed, the sound rich and warm, and Sophia knew she was exactly where she belonged. In a cottage by the sea, with a man who taught her that the best things in life couldn't be rushed, couldn't be bought, and couldn't be planned. They could only be lived.